If you want to catch more bass in your ponds and lakes this month, then this is the video for you. In this video, I'm going to teach you guys how the weather affects your bodies of water in the month of September, give you all a good understanding on the forage species, what the bass are actually eating, and of course, a top list of lures recommended for exactly where you fish. My name's Tyler, it's the month of September, and let's talk about it. Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all. I can't believe what I just caught. Yes! Now, the first thing to understand about the month of September is that fall fishing is starting, at least to some degree, in every state in America, besides maybe Florida, Arizona, and Southern California, because it's too dang hot. But the degree to which fall arrives depends entirely on one main factor, and that is cold fronts. All across the South, especially in Texas where I live, we may only experience 1 to maybe 2 major cold fronts throughout this month. I say 2 if we're lucky, because it's still pretty dang hot. But for you guys who live up in New York, Ohio, Michigan, all the way to Minnesota, you may experience upwards of 3 to 5 cold fronts, which can radically change the list of lures that I recommend. So that is why I'm going to recommend 3 separate sections, 3 separate regions of lure recommendations for you guys here in a second. And as those cold fronts blow themselves in from the north, they bring about some awesome shallow water fishing as they rapidly cool the water temperatures down, therefore accelerating the metabolism of everything in your body of water. Now, it usually takes a day or 2 after a major cold front for the fishing to actually get better, but I'm just telling you guys, I've traveled all across the country, and fall can bring about some awesome fishing, and fall is driven by cold fronts. And the second factor to keep in mind about fall fishing, especially with September being the earliest fall is that bait fish become ultra important. There will be big pods, big schools of bait fish out deep, and smaller schools up shallow, but regardless of where you fish, what type of body of water it is, with few exceptions, bait fish are a huge deal, and bass key in on them almost exclusively. So keep your fishing moving fast all throughout September, even if you feel like it's still hot and the air temperature would tell you, you know, it's summertime still, I should be throwing the same lures I threw in the early dog days of summer. Again, air temperature does not matter. It is all about water temperature, and as the water temperature cools, the air temperature after a cold front may rise back to being warm, but the cold water temperature is definitely dictating a totally different list of lures than the air temperature does. So understand there may be a little bit of a difference there. Now, what if your body of water out there, you know, many ponds are like this, don't have a whole lot of bait fish, a large population, or any bait fish at all? What do you do? Well, I can guarantee you have some form of forage out there, usually bluegill are number 2, or crawfish are number 3, and those as well are getting more active in the fall time, and so fishing faster, going across the bank faster, moving the trolling motor faster is going to do you better in September than going slower. Unless you have like 0 cold fronts at all, and then maybe your fish are still in the dog days. But like I said, the fall is driven by cold fronts. September is the beginning of the fall for most states out there, and even in Texas, it is hotter than you know where, and yet I am still deciding to throw lures that imitate bait fish more and move even faster, because I've seen on my LiveScope screen, even in early September, the bass are absolutely chasing bait fish. So with those 2 factors now understood, it's time we talk about the lure recommendations for the month of September. And I'm going to talk about this, like I said, in 3 main regions: the South, the Central, and the North, starting where I live here in Texas, the South. And as I take these lures out of the box, understand that these top 5, top 3 lures videos are never an exhaustive list. You're going to see me on my channel here catch fish on other lures that I'm not recommending in this video. I think these lures here give you the best possible chance of going out there and having a successful day out on the water, which is exactly why they are always tied on my bass boat or on the bank. But enough chit chat. Lure number 1 for the month of September here in Texas or Alabama or Georgia or whatever you consider the South, and that is the topwater frog. Now, Tyler, you've been talking about the frog since March or April here in Texas. Why do you keep talking about it? Well, it's because I don't care where you're fishing, in a pond, in a lake, in a river, you have usually some kind of shallow cover. For most of us, it is aquatic vegetation. And by this point in the year, you have so much vegetation growth, some alive, some dying off, that it's oftentimes hard to throw any other type of topwater. And as bass move shallower and get more active, it is hard to beat a topwater because 1, it's fun, and 2, because the fish are in a mood to eat a lure like that. And so when it comes to all those conditions together, the frog is simply the best choice. The second lure I'm gonna recommend, again, tons work in Texas in this month, but the number 2 lure that I'm gonna say is going to be my top pond lure of all time, and that is the soft plastic jerkbait, specifically the Strike King Caffeine Shad. And I love this lure category because of 2 main reasons. One, it is a perfect representation of tons of different forage the bass, like I mentioned, are eating in September. You have bluegill and you have, of course, your shad, your gray, your white variations that represent bait fish. But leaving aside the whole representation factor, you can also fish this thing in 2 main ways. Weightless for your ultra shallow fish and on a belly weighted hook for your more deeper fish. So if you're in a big lake with bluff walls, you can throw a caffeine shad. If you're in a pond with a shallow grass line or a grass flat, you can throw a caffeine shad. It works everywhere. The soft plastic jerkbait, at least in my opinion, with the presence of aquatic vegetation still around, is the best weedless type of reaction covering water, but still can be slow type of lure to get you some bass in the month of September. Now, before we talk about the central and northern region lures for September, if you are not planning your fishing trips with the Bass Forecast app, you are missing out. Bass Forecast is an awesome mobile app that I've had a hand in helping to design that puts everything weather and fishing combined related at your fingertips. And this platform right here is the only fishing app that actually uses current, past, and future weather data to help predict how the fish should bite, where they're gonna be biting, and of course, what lures they're biting on. One of the awesome features the app has is called Buddy Alerts, and what that does is sends a notification to your phone anytime an epic rated day is coming up for fishing in your area, letting you know, hey, maybe you should take off a morning of work because the app says fishing should be good on that day. And I'm not kidding you guys, I actually use those notifications to let me know when to prioritize going out to film, and I've had some of my best fishing days ever by following the Bass Forecast Buddy Alerts. There is so much more the app can do. It is an awesome fishing platform, and like I said, I've had a hand in helping to design both the externals and the internals of this app, and it would be awesome if y'all would go to the video description and download Bass Forecast. And a little cherry on top, the premium version with all the features gets you access to a $20 Tackle Warehouse gift card, which basically makes the entire premium membership free. One of the best ways you guys can support this channel is by helping out the sponsors that help me make a living, Bass Forecast being an awesome company that I've worked with for many years and I hope to for many years in the future. Now, let's talk about the lures for September for the central region. Now, when it comes to the central region, you have a whole lot of options, but I love to go ultra top water and ultra fast for the central region. So that's anywhere, I'd say, north of Oklahoma and south of Ohio, kind of that skinny center part of the country. Talking about cold fronts one more time, you guys probably get 2 to 3 cold fronts throughout this entire month, which can really bring your water temperatures down to like the 60s, even the high 50s, which really gets your bass active. So the number 1 lure, similar to the southern region, is going to be a topwater. Now, it doesn't have to be a frog. If you've got grass in your pond, I would still recommend a frog. But for the most part, you can throw any topwater lures as long as you have some relatively open water. And a lot of those central of the country bodies of water, the highland lakes, they have tons of open water. And so your walking baits, your whopper ploppers, your buzz baits are amazing lures for the fall in the central region. So if you live in the central region and you're saying to me right now, Tyler, you don't get it, topwater doesn't work where I live, I promise you, give it a few cold fronts, let the weather stabilize back out, and you'll find yourself, as long as you commit to it, to catching quite a few bass on topwater. And the second lure category is going to be just kind of reaction baits as a whole, but because the aquatic vegetation in your bodies of water is still probably relatively healthy, you can go with the less weedless versions of your reaction baits, such as your vibrating jigs, your chatterbaits, or your shallow diving crankbaits, just like my favorite, the Hybrid Hunter. I don't know what it is about the Hybrid Hunter, but when it comes to shallow active fish, they absolutely tear this thing up. I'm talking around rocks, around wood, around grass. As long as you learn to reel the bait slower around cover, this thing is so buoyant, it will hit a piece of wood, it will hit a rock, and it will pop up, and then you continue your retrieve. And I'm not saying it's weedless, it's still got 2 big old treble hooks on there, but as far as crankbaits go, it's far more weedless than the rest of them, and that's why I recommend these 2 lures. Now, when it comes to colors for all these lures, I realize I didn't really discuss colors so far. You want to go with what imitates what your bass are eating most. So if they're eating bait fish, you want to throw nothing besides various shades of white, gray, chartreuse and white, maybe mixing in some blueback for herring lakes. With the abundance of bait fish the bass in your bodies of water have to choose from, you want to match the hatch as closely as possible, when other times of the year it might not matter as much. Now, moving on to the northern region, you guys are the place that I love visiting when it comes to early fall fishing. Matter of fact, I will be there in early September, probably a few days after this video launches, and that is the state of Minnesota, New York, Upper Michigan, Michigan, Ohio. Y'all, like I said, have a few cold fronts that hit your bodies of water throughout September, which can rapidly decrease the water levels even faster than the rest of the regions, which is why I recommend a topwater walking bait. Again, any top waters can really work. I'm probably gonna catch a fish on a frog, on a plopper, on a buzzbait in Minnesota when I head up there in about a week. But when it comes to catching the most fish possible, getting good casting distance, covering a ton of water, I think the topwater walking bait, specifically the Strike King Sexy Dog, either the small version, the regular, or y'all have seen on my channel, the Mega Dog, they can all work, they all catch fish, and it doesn't really necessarily matter matching the hatch as much with size, unless your bass are smallmouth or spotted bass and they are ultra keyed in on a certain type of bait fish size. But for the most part, as long as you're getting your lure far away from the bank, far away from the boat, and when I say, I'm gonna kind of rewind here. When I say far away from the bank, I don't mean like out into open water, I mean like far away from you as an angler, which still might mean paralleling the bank. Sorry, I'm rambling. All that to say, the topwater walking bait is one of my favorites for catching bass in early September up in the northern region, and you're gonna see that here on my channel in the next few weeks. Now, the lure that I have in my hand here, the next recommendation, is actually not a fast-moving lure, although I guess you could retrieve it fast, but for the most part, it's not meant to be, and that is the soft plastic swim bait. Now, the reason why I recommend these is because you guys up north have a lot of smallmouth bass in your bodies of water. I'm not saying in the central and southern regions we don't, but for the most part, that is not a species that most guys actually target in September. But you guys in the Great Lakes regions, in the Finger Lakes in New York, you guys are actually targeting smallmouth bass a lot of the times, and there is no better lure, in my opinion, for this time of the year for smallmouth bass that I have seen on live scope chasing down bait fish just a few days ago when I was in Wisconsin, and that is on the soft plastic swim bait. You can catch them on a drop shot, you can catch them on hard jerkbait we'll talk about here in a second, but I think for the majority of deeper shad eating fish that don't want something retrieved really fast, the soft plastic jig head swim bait is a great lure for that. And I just released an entire soft plastic swim bait masterclass video that I will leave in the video description. Now, the third lure category I'm going to recommend for this region is going to be the shallow to medium diving crankbait. I would kind of eliminate deep diving crankbaits. Most fish in the northern region are going to be in shallower water, on shallower flats, humps, grass edges. And so a crankbait, as long as your grass is relatively healthy or the grass is totally dying off, the crankbait is going to be a great choice for that. The Hybrid Hunter, the Square Bill around grass and rocks, a lipless crankbait. As your water temperatures definitely plummet, the lipless crankbait gets even better. But you really have to find whatever crankbait works best for you. And if you are struggling to catch bass on crankbaits in ponds, don't you worry, I've got that video coming for you guys very soon here on the channel. While I talked about the soft plastic jerkbait in the southern category, I'm going to talk about the hard plastic jerkbait in the north, because if you are fishing more open water, smallmouth, rock bodies of water, it's really hard to beat the hard jerkbait, because I would almost always rather go with a treble hooked lure over a wide gap weedless lure, because you usually get better hookup ratio. And so as your grass starts to die off, as your fish start to get more roaming behaviors, chasing bait fish, a hard plastic jerkbait, absolutely fan cast as fast as you can, giving it a nice speedy retrieve, has the ability to find fish a lot faster than almost every other lure on this list, besides maybe the shallow to medium diving crankbait. Well, my goodness, that was a heck of a lot of information. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and learned something. If you did, hit that subscribe button. I'm gonna put a separate video that I've made up in the corner right here talking about the hard jerkbait and how to fish it, because especially if you guys in the central at the end of September and the northern region, this lure is an absolute player, and I have a masterclass on how to fish that lure and choose the right one for your water depth. I will have that here in the corner. My name's Tyler, and we'll see you guys in that video or next time right here on TRF.